Welcome back to Raw Machines, your journey into the world's most impressive processes. Today, join me as we follow the entire process of handcrafting wooden rakes and ladders, the very tools that once sustained the people of the Ruhrberg region. No machinery, no industrial standards, just forest timber, charcoal fires, and knowledge passed down through generations. Let's get started. Before the 1950s, nearly half of the residents of Ruhrberg lived on agriculture and forestry. But it was not a land of abundance. The soil here was stony and nutrient poor, allowing for only subsistence farming. It was in that narrow gap between enough to eat and not enough to survive that the craft of rake making was born. The forest didn't offer bread, but it offered wood. And from wood, if one knew how, tools could be crafted to trade for money, food, or simply to keep a family from hunger. Today, Mr. Ludwig Lauscher, a skilled carpenter, will demonstrate this traditional handcrafted rake-making technique once more. Everything begins in the forest with Y-shaped hazelwood branches. The craftsman fells the branch and cuts it to a length based on his own body, a measurement that is both convenient and deeply personal. The natural fork is preserved, and the two branches don't need to be perfectly symmetrical. In fact, that slight offset helps distribute the force more effectively when the rake is being pulled.
Wat lijkt me die vorige her, dat doen we die daar. Nu bieren.
Oh, ach, waar ken je zo?
Wat ken je daar?
After being cut, the hazel branches are brought back and placed over glowing embers. The fire isn't used to burn, but to persuade the wood to soften. When the temperature is just right, the bark is easily stripped away, leaving the wood ready to be straightened. A few charred marks remain, left unconcealed. They are traces of the process, the signature of fire upon the wood. As it cools, the character of the rake handle has changed. It is straighter and more obedient, yet it retains the necessary elasticity. This is the backbone of the rake, the direct connection between the human body and the earth. In the meantime, Ludwig Lauscher has begun sawing willow trunks into individual segments to create the rake's teeth. Basket willow is the wood of choice here because it is soft, lightweight, and incredibly easy to work with. The trunk is sawn into sections roughly 22 centimeters long, then split using a small hatchet on a wooden chopping block. From a single log, the craftsman yields between 8 and 16 teeth, each measuring about 18 centimeters once finished. Before World War II, many unemployed young men would head into the forest to gather willow wood. This timber was then sold to the sole rake maker in Würzburg. From his workshop, the finished rakes would make their journey to Aachen and the surrounding regions. During the era of scarcity between the two world wars, 1 out of every 2 households was involved in rake making. Winter was the season for production. Spring and summer were the seasons for trade. Some would balance 10 or 20 rakes on their bicycles, traveling from village to village. There was no advertising, no branding. There was only word-of-mouth reputation and the locals who came to buy. Now the 2 craftsmen carry the bundled wood into the home workshop to continue processing it. Ludwig Lauscher's woodworking shop is small and closely intertwined with family life. It sits right next to the house, where the sound of hammers and blades striking wood blends seamlessly with the rhythms of everyday living. At the heart of the workshop stands a Schniedebank, a traditional shaving bench. The craftsman sits astride the bench, using foot pressure to clamp the wooden blank in place, leaving both hands completely free to guide the drawknife. There are no screws, no complex mechanisms, only body weight and the coordinated rhythm of hands and feet. This setup allows each rake tooth to be shaved down gradually, thinned just enough while still retaining a square edge. That square edge is no accident. It ensures that the tooth grips firmly once driven into the rake head, capable of withstanding continuous pulling forces through heavy, damp hay. Once the teeth are ready, work begins on the rake head, the plet. Beechwood is the preferred choice here due to its hardness and long-term durability under heavy loads. The wooden board is carefully marked and secured with clamps, then cut with a frame saw that has been lubricated with grease to allow the blade to glide smoothly through the wood fibers. The drilling process is where precision becomes vital. The holes for the teeth are spaced at least 3 cm apart, not only to accommodate the 15 to 24 teeth, but also to ensure that force is distributed evenly during use. The hole for the handle is hand-drilled and then gradually widened with a spoon bit to create a tapered shape. This taper allows the forked branches of the handle to self-tighten as they are driven in. Finally, it is time for the break edge stage. The sharp corners of the rake head are lightly shaved down, and both ends of the body are tapered to a point. While this step isn't strictly necessary for structural integrity, it is vital for durability and user experience. A superior rake must not only be strong, but also obedient in the user's hands, free of rough spots that could cause blisters or fatigue after long hours of labor. The rake head is complete. Now, the handle fork and the teeth must be processed and assembled. The craftsman places the fork onto the shaving horse, using a drawknife to sharpen the top end of the handle. This allows a farmer to easily plant the rake into a hayloft, or the ground when taking a break. The handle is also stripped of any protruding knots to ensure a smooth surface that fits comfortably in the hand. The installation of the teeth is not random. The center tooth is driven in first, followed by the others in an alternating left-right sequence. This specific order ensures that force is distributed evenly, preventing the rake head from twisting or warping over years of use. This technique is precisely what gives the Rurberg rake its legendary stability. Once the row of teeth is complete, the craftsman marks the length, trims the excess, and sharpens each one. No two teeth are perfectly identical, yet when viewed as a whole, they form a remarkably uniform line. The greatest advantage of this assembly method is its repairability. When a tooth breaks, the farmer doesn't need to discard the entire tool. They simply pull out the damaged tooth and drive in a new one. In a subsistence economy, the ability to repair a tool was just as vital as its initial performance. Finally, the Y-shaped fork is inserted into the two tapered holes on the rake head and hammered tight. A single nail is driven through to lock the structure in place, and the excess ends of the fork are sawn off cleanly. At this moment, the rake is formally complete. It is remarkable that the Rurberg rake can be used on both sides. The design, featuring two rows of teeth installed at an angle, allows the user to both gather and flip the hay without needing to rotate the handle. When the craftsman places the rake on the ground and tests it with a light pulling motion, he isn't checking its appearance. He is listening to the tool's feedback. If it glides smoothly, without vibration or veering, it means every part has truly become one. Only then is the rake considered ready to leave the workshop and enter its life of labor in the fields. But the farmer's work does not only take place on the ground. When autumn arrives and the ripe fruit hangs high above, they need another way to continue their labor. That is the moment they turn to their ladders. In the Bergisches land, markets were not close at hand. Consequently, farmers were accustomed to crafting their own tools right in their backyards, using whatever materials the forest and the farm provided. Building a ladder was rarely a one-man job. It was typically an undertaking where two neighbors lent each other a hand. The work usually begins with the rungs, the part that directly bears the full weight of the person standing. These are crafted on a cutting bench and shaving horse hybrid known as a fash bank. The craftsman sits facing the wood, pulling the drawknife toward himself with steady, rhythmic strokes.
Hat er mooi naar de koning al een keer, joh. Ja. Het is joh, zie je? Erg, joh. Ja, het is geen wat los.
Each rung is rounded, with both ends tapered into a conical shape. The middle section is always kept thicker. This is not about aesthetics, but rather a deep understanding of physics. When a person stands on the ladder, the weight is not distributed evenly. The center bears the greatest load, so the wood must be strong exactly where it counts.
Joep, hoeveel sprassen moest er nog maken? Wat, 2 stuk? 2? Oh, die hij vlot. Ja. Is er een weer per de shoe? Ongeveer, ja. Hoeveel moeten we er maken? Ja, aan het doen, op dit project.
To avoid damaging the structure of the wood fibers, the rungs are split from solid timber rather than sawn. Afterward, a broadaxe is used for rough shaping, and the drawknife performs the delicate finishing work. Some rungs are round, while others are flat. The flat rungs, with their larger ends, are typically placed in the middle and at both ends of the ladder. They act as invisible backbones, preventing the entire structure from twisting when placed on steep slopes.
Je bent weer teruggehaald, wilt u de beste zien hoe schudden? Ik ben erbij. Ja? Ja, dan moet je smellen je hoor weer die op.
The craft of ladder making doesn't take place during the busy seasons. It belongs to winter, once the autumn planting is finished and the fields are at rest.
Ik ben hier zo wie gesmaakt wat een halve beer is, niet voor die leden. Ja.
The material chosen for the rungs is typically oak, hard, tough, and excellent at bearing weight. Meanwhile, the rails are made from pine, which is lighter and easier to work with. This combination relies on an ancient engineering principle. Seasoned dry oak rungs are inserted into green pine rails. As the pine rails dry over time, they shrink, tightly gripping the oak rungs and creating a bond that grows stronger and more secure with age. Beyond ladders, farmers also craft several other essential tools during these months, such as fence posts, harrow teeth, harrow frames, brooms, and shovel handles. The ladder rails begin with a small pine tree, selected directly from the family forest. It isn't necessarily the tallest or the most beautiful tree, but one that is straight, uniform, and has few knots. The trunk is placed onto a sawbuck or a two-wheeled ox cart. Wooden blocks and wedges are hammered tight to ensure the trunk doesn't twist or roll. Once everything is stable, the frame saw is brought into position. This is a task that demands total coordination. One person saws, while the other holds, both listening to the sound of the blade to know if it's following the grain correctly. Once the log is split, the measuring begins. A chalk line is snapped to determine the main axis. A folding ruler is used to mark every 26 millimeters, the standard distance between rungs. Each point is then marked with a small nail. A deviation of just a few millimeters is enough to cause the rungs to be uneven during assembly. When that happens, the ladder lies to the climber, and a lying ladder is incredibly dangerous.
Så, måste snurra loss. Ja.
Pilot drilling is a critical transition, from lines drawn on wood to the actual form of the ladder. To ensure precision, the craftsman does not drill directly on the ground. Instead, a dedicated drilling frame is set up, tall enough to apply proper force and rigid enough to prevent vibration.
Det borde vi gjort, va? Gjort, ja. So, yeah.
Using a twist auger or a snake auger bit, the craftsman drills from the top face straight through to the underside, following the marked points exactly. These are pilot holes, not the final shape yet, but they determine the precise position of each ladder rung to come.
Jo, just det. Måste ju så hatta ju gjort över spö. Ja. Alles klar. Bussen upp till järnjord.
Every hole is a check in itself. Straightness, depth, and the feel of the bit as it passes through the grain. Wood responds clearly, and the craftsman listens to that response with both eyes and hands.
Jag har gjort hit. Next loch. Så. Next loch.
Not all ladders are created equal. Temporary ladders, commonly seen on construction sites, use nailed-on rungs. They are built quickly and used quickly, but they fail just as fast. The nails loosen, the wood splits, and the danger grows over time.
Yeah. With the door shut. Yeah. So.
Fruit-picking ladders are different. Each rung is fitted through the rail, becoming an integral part of the structure itself. There are no redundant parts. Nothing is temporary. After drilling, the rails are returned to the sawbuck. The apprentice holds the trunk steady while the lead craftsman saws along the established chalk line. At the very end, where the saw blade cannot reach, the wood is split by hand. It shears off along the grain. No snapping, no shattering. That is the moment the ladder rails are truly born.
We kunnen bresje, ja. Alles, zo, dat let om hem in beeld.
After the pilot drilling, the ladder rails have only their basic form. To ensure the rungs fit tightly and endure through many seasons of labor, those holes must be refined one step further. The craftsman widens the holes from the inside face of the rail, creating a slight conical taper. This flare is carefully calculated so that the rung ends, which are tapered to match, will self-lock once driven in. This is the foundation of a nail-free joint, where shape and compression alone hold the structure together. The base of the ladder is then sharpened with a broadaxe to bite firmly into soft ground. The bark is stripped away, and any knots are leveled to make the rails sleek and safe to handle. The surface is not smoothed excessively, preserving the necessary friction for a secure grip by hands and feet. At this stage, the rails are ready. Measurements are almost no longer needed. The craftsman relies entirely on experience and his feel for the material. The two rails lie side by side, silently waiting for the moment they are joined into a complete ladder.
John, primary cross. Zo. Eins, you. Right, that's klaar. Station.
Assembly is the moment of truth, where every previous step is put to the test.
What do you?
The craftsman begins by driving the rungs into the first rail. Each rung is seated into its predetermined position and hammered home with just the right amount of force. Throughout this process, the craftsman constantly checks to ensure that the rungs remain perfectly perpendicular to the rail.
Zo, goed.
When the second rail is placed on top, the ends of the rungs slot into their corresponding holes one by one. No nails or lashings are required. The precision of the earlier stages makes the assembly feel almost natural. The ladder has now taken its final form. Not a single nail, not a single cord. Its entire structural integrity comes from the geometry, the fit of the wood, and the passage of time, which will handle the rest of the work. At approximately 3 meters in length, the ladder is destined for harvesting plums, the most common fruit tree on the hillsides of the Bergische land. It is light enough to move, sturdy enough to stand firm on uneven ground, and durable enough to serve through many harvests. For the craftsman, that is the clearest sign that the job has been done right. Looking back at the entire process, from the rake resting low in the grass to the ladder reaching into the treetops, it is clear that this is more than just a story about woodworking. It is a story of how humans adapt to their environment. In Ruhrberg and the Bergische land, the soil was poor, the forest yielded little food, and the markets were distant. Under such conditions, farmers could not afford to buy ready-made tools. They were forced to build them themselves, and to build them well enough to last, to be repairable, and to never become a financial burden during lean years. The rakes and ladders were not designed for beauty or for quick sales. They were built for load-bearing, to ensure they would never betray the user in the heat of labor. Interestingly, almost every stage of the process allowed for minor variations. No two rake teeth were identical, and no ladder rung was exactly like the next. Yet, within these very differences, the structure achieved a greater stability. The design was meant to self-adjust. Seasoned wood and green wood tightened against each other. Forces redistributed over time, and when a single part failed, it could be replaced without discarding the whole. In a subsistence economy, this was more than a technical solution. It was a way of long-term thinking. Today, when most tools are standardized and mass-produced, these methods may no longer be economically necessary. However, they still reveal a different approach to labor and materials, one that is slower, more tempered, and rooted in a deep understanding of what is held in one's hands. The rakes and ladders of Ruhrberg did not just serve a specific harvest, they remind us of a simple truth. For generations, people survived by making just enough, making it carefully, and ensuring that a tool was not something to be replaced, but something to accompany a life for the long haul. Thank you for listening to the end of the story. If you enjoy videos like this, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next stories. Raw Machines says goodbye, and we'll see you again soon.